All right, so this is the fourth time that I'm going to restart this now because we got people walking back and forth. I just got spritzed because they turned the sprinklers on. So we're going to get through this one way or another. 48-41, USC beats Colorado today. A bit of a tale of two halves, I thought, in this game. The Buffs with their fourth consecutive slow start. It wasn't until their third drive where they really put everything together. But offensively, I was impressed with the way that Colorado committed to running the football. It wasn't just with the running backs. Shedeur Sanders, if the play wasn't there, did a much better job of recognizing it early, tucking, and moving the chains. Colorado did a much better job today of staying out of the third and longs. Now, in the first half, the sense of urgency and the hunger, I felt like, just didn't match where USC was at. Not to mention, they beat themselves quite a bit today. 7 penalties for the Buffs, just 5 penalties for USC. But they didn't play quite as large of a role as they have in weeks past. It was more of Colorado's execution, right? There were some tricky spots, I thought, in the first half. As things started to progress, the running of the football, first and second down with Anthony Hankerson, there was much more of a commitment to it than there was the last several weeks. And we talked about it with Coach Prime throughout the week, that is something, that is an area of their game that they have to commit to. If you expect to beat good teams being one-dimensional, you're delusional. And today, they adjusted, right? And good coaching staffs and good teams, they can adjust week to week. And Shiloh brought it up to me several weeks ago about how they adjusted between TCU and Nebraska. Well, they didn't make those week-to-week adjustments heading into Oregon, but today against USC, they got their tails whooped against, up in Eugene, came back and showed a little bit more pride and fight, certainly, but it wasn't until they spotted USC several scores. I thought there was another level of development today from Shedeur Sanders in his game. He did have a bad interception, but he came back, learned from it, started throwing the ball away, started tucking and going a little bit more, and Colorado keeping themselves at a third and long into more third and manageables with that run game, even when it wasn't effective, even when they were getting taken down at the line of scrimmage, sticking with it forced USC's defense to play honest, and I thought in the second half opened some things up. Now, certainly the emergence of true freshman wide receiver Omarion Miller, Omarion, by the way, not Omarion, Omarion, as Shedeur corrected, 3 or 4 different media members during the press conference. Omarion, 196 yards and a touchdown today. That is a CU freshman record for receiving yards in a game. Look, Omarion has shown a little bit in training camp, a little bit in practice, but he really had a breakout game today. Javon Antonio a little bit banged up, I think, again in this game, and they needed Omarion Miller, so much so where he was, I thought, maybe their most important player down the stretch. He was the one moving the chains along with Shedeur Sanders. Again, Anthony Hankerson, I thought Hankerson played really well. They rushed the ball effectively, but it wasn't until Omarion Miller got onto the field and started receiving regular snaps that they played really, really good football to close this game. Now, they still gave up points in the second half, but they were coming back. At one point, it was 41-14, okay? This team got their tails kicked in the first half, and you're sitting there at halftime going, man, at least you got the score before the break. We knew they'd get the football back, but at that point, you still needed multiple touchdowns to come back in the game. Well, they don't score right out of the break, right out of the locker room. Then USC scores, you're going, oh boy. At one point, USC had them down 41-14, and then Colorado came storming back. Huge turnover, huge interception by Cameron Silman Craig. I have no idea why Caleb Williams threw that football. Overall, though, it was Colorado's defense, I felt, that finally put their heels in the ground and said enough is enough and provided some complimentary football for this offense. And as Coach Prime mentioned in the presser, had Shedeur Sanders gotten the ball back one final time after cutting it to just one score at the very end of the game, he ended up doing it with 1:43 left on the clock. Who's to say what is to happen? But there's a pretty good chance with momentum on their side that Shedeur ends up leading them down the field to at least tie the game. Problem was, there wasn't enough time. They got the ball back with 5:58 and just one timeout, I should say, on the clock. They had to burn 2 timeouts defensively. That's not what you want to do. Poor Coach Prime, poor Charles Kelly, right? And it was defensively because it was misalignment. At least that's what it looked like to me. For Shedeur, I thought, offensively, he took his time. I mean, you have 5:58, you need 2 touchdowns, you're down 2 scores, you get the ball at the 20-yard line. There needs to be a sense of urgency. Sean Lewis kept running the football, and Shedeur said, to be fair, he checked into runs. I asked him about how that entire sequence went because everybody in the stadium is sitting there going, why are you running the football? Shedeur said that he checked into a lot of those runs. Look, he said it's either I do that or everybody doesn't run the right play. He said I'd rather take time and get down there. The problem is, by taking as much time as they did take, they limited themselves to only an onside kick being their saving grace, and Jace Feely just didn't hit that right. But I would have liked to see a little bit more sense of urgency, and running the ball's great, right? We've been asking this team and begging this team to be multi-dimensional, and today I felt like some really good steps forward with what not only the running backs were able to do, but what Shedeur was able to do on the ground. Problem is, time and score, right? 5:58 left, you're down 2 scores. Hey, need a little giddy up. But the other thing in that, and to be fair, your right tackle goes down, you got a backup right tackle in Savion Washington. Coach Prime after the game said wanted really badly to re-enter the game, but he just couldn't do it. They need him for the stretch run, as Coach mentioned. And then you had Omarion Miller, who was a true freshman. You had some other guys receiving some of their first action, right? In an environment that was electric in here when they finally were able to claw back into the game. And I just felt like there wasn't a great enough sense of urgency. And look, who am I to criticize from the outside based upon what the reads were and what Shedeur was seeing? But more than anything, I thought it was another step in his development. Poised, matured, except you gotta know time and score just a little bit better. And as he said, I'd be willing to take my time and wait this thing out. So we'll see moving forward. You know, I imagine when they get in that type of situation again, there will be an adjustment. I mean, you have to know time and score. Whether or not you want to take your time, you want to leave yourself with an opportunity, right? And there were so many of those plays where time just keeps ticking away, and he's just looking back at the sideline, he's checking into a run, he's making sure he's got the right read. Look, there's a ton of information to process at the line of scrimmage, but you fought so hard to claw your way back. It just felt like, man, it's a shame that you're not really going to give yourselves another chance with the football. But again, you would have had to stop USC. I just felt like the clock management there, the last 6 minutes of the game, you can question it, and I think that it is fair game, certainly. And we'll talk to Coach Prime on Tuesday. The level of attention from national writers this thing is getting now is just out of control, right? You're getting a lot of people in these pressers that just want to talk to Prime rather than ask legitimate questions. So there are fewer and fewer opportunities. But on Tuesday, we'll iron some of that stuff out. I will say, though, defensively, you had to be impressed with the bounce-back performance after giving up 42, right? You didn't play well whatsoever in the first half. You gave up 34 in the first half. Well, you bounced back in a really big way in the second half. And yeah, okay, you gave up a couple of scores, but you gave the offense an opportunity to come back in this game. And I think when you're talking about Colorado, really, when you're playing some of these better teams, what you have to do is just give yourself a chance at the end of the game. Because with Shedeur Sanders and the boys he maintains, as Prime said, if he gets the ball back, are we doubting that they're going to go down the field and make a big-time play? No, I'm not doubting that whatsoever. Look, I think at the end of the day, Colorado has some things to work on offensively, certainly, to get out of the blocks faster. Because if you keep giving your opponent this much rhythm to start games, man, you're just putting yourself behind the 8 ball. Defensively, no Shiloh Sanders today. Roderick Ward started. Thought he did okay, right? I mean, in his first real snaps, obviously you do miss Shiloh, and you definitely miss Travis Hunter. You're missing 2 of your 4 defensive backs, 3 of 5, right? Without Carter Stoudemeyer, who would be playing. It did allow an opportunity for Cormani McClain to play today, which I thought he stepped up and made some big plays, and that's got to be a really encouraging sign because Coach Prime talked about him this week, talked about the fact that he wasn't showing up to meetings, maybe showing up late. Even in yesterday's well-off media video, the word of the day was on time for Cormani McClain. Well, today he was on time and stepped up when Colorado needed him most, and certainly I think moving forward, he's earned himself a bigger role on this team because right now they need the snaps. I don't know what the story is on Travis Hunter for Arizona State. We know he wanted to play today. Coach Prime mentioned 3 to 4 weeks. I'm guessing he's not going to play next week, which is a bit of a bummer. But again, he would have been a huge contributor out here on the field today, and I looked up at the end of the game, and I actually got to do a pretty cool thing today with some of the students where we called the game today and ran some of the students through and rotated them through and were able to give back a little bit because for those of you who don't know, that's how I originally started here, 4 years of calling college football, calling CU football. I think I only ever called 1 win against Central Arkansas, I want to say in 2013. And so today, having the opportunity to call a matchup like this in the Prime era was really exciting, right? But there was a different vibe. There was a hopeless vibe back in those days, right? There was a hopeless vibe last week in Oregon. Colorado put their foot in the ground and said, look, we may lose today, but we're going down swinging. And they definitely took a couple of big shots at USC in that second half. And I thought, look, had you tacked on another quarter, this is a very different game. Problem is, you got to figure out how to not need that and start in the first quarter, right? And Coach Prime said, look, we got to figure out the slow starts. I'll give you a big reason why. You're deferring to a really good offense that your defense can't stop, and your first possession, you're throwing a ball. Run the ball. I mean, it eventually worked for them and it opened up the offense entirely. I think moving forward, as long as Colorado commits, and Coach Prime talked about this as well in the post-game press conference, that the Buffs haven't developed much of an identity yet. Well, today I thought in the second half, the work that they put in goes a long way to developing more of an identity. What do you want to be? Who are you when you step out onto this field? And next week at Arizona State, it's a much more winnable game than this one was. And even still, they would have had a good chance to win with just a few more minutes or a few plays here or there. That's got to be really encouraging. Coach Prime talked about in the press conference how if you don't understand the direction that CU football is headed, then you must be out of your damn mind. I mean, look, that's exactly what I'm saying here. The hopelessness that we used to feel around here, that's gone. Like, the fans finally started leaving and filtering out when it was 41-14, and even still, I'm sitting there and going, man, it's still plenty of time left in the third quarter. You know, I mean, yes, it's probably out of reach, barring a miracle, but a lot of people stuck around even when it didn't look good. I would say maybe at most 500 people left. In years past, the student section would have been gone at halftime if you were down 34-14, 34-7, whatever it was at half. But here's what I liked about Colorado today. Offensively, they opened things up, right? They were using more misdirection. They were making the defense play honest by the fact that they were able to commit to running the football, and as a result, they ran the ball efficiently today. I thought that they did some really nice things, and with Shedeur running as well, it forced some of those defensive ends, Solomon Byrd, right defensive lineman, Bear Alexander. Those guys were in the backfield, but they weren't a terror today. I didn't think Colorado's offensive line was just under siege like they had been. Now, certainly, they allowed a lot of pressure, and Shedeur and Sean Lewis cooked up an offensive scheme, and Shedeur made the reads and read his keys and made his way through his progressions to get the ball out quicker. But at the same time, I thought offensively, there was a little bit more creativity. Again, I go back to what happened in the final 6 minutes. You have one timeout, you had to burn two defensively, in situations that just you hate to have to do that as an offense, because if you had them down the stretch, so much time ticked away again. They scored with 1:43 and they got the ball with 5:58. Now they had to go the length of the field. I recognize that, but there were a lot of run plays when I thought, look, where's the sense of urgency? I mean, you can run the ball throughout the game, but you're going to need to score twice, not just one. If they needed one touchdown, you got to love that final drive. Although in that scenario, maybe you leave too much time on the clock for Caleb Williams. But overall, I think there are some encouraging signs here that this program is headed in the right direction. Now, again, coaching-wise down the stretch, I felt like things got a little bit shaky. And even Shedeur said, look, I was the one checking into runs. You know who our coach is. He wants to go hyper-tempo, but I slowed it down. On that point, Colorado has to be able to slow it down throughout the rest of the game. You got to be able to I love the hyper-tempo offense. I love that. But when you get in the car, you don't just get in the car, slam your foot to the floor, and go 0 to 60 every time you take off. No, sometimes you got to hit 30, you got to hit 40, you got to hit 50. And I'd like to see Sean Lewis maybe develop a little bit more of that identity where, look, we're going to build up to it. Or if the situation calls for it, okay, we will hit the pedal to the floor, right? But Shedeur, I thought, look, even though they wasted too much time, it's better than getting into a play and then not executing because guys don't know where they are alignment-wise. And that's what he said. You know, it's easy for us to sit and pick and choose from the outside. I thought Shedeur was pretty good today, given the fact that first half, I mean, they couldn't get any intermediate or deep passing going. Xavier Weaver at one point, I think, had 7 catches for 20 yards. Credit to him for fighting the way he did with the sprained ankle today. That showed some real character from Xavier Weaver. Jimmy Horn, a good day. He had a drop, but he had 2 touchdowns. I thought it was and that touchdown in the first half was absolutely massive. Mikey Harrison, I thought the tight end screen was a big part of the game plan today, and they executed most of those pretty well. A drop there or two, and maybe a missed block here or there. But that's got to be more of their offense. Colorado has to do a better job, as we spoke about after Oregon, manufacturing wins. And I thought today a lot more of the ingredients were in place for that recipe of manufacturing wins. Now, We'll see how they build on it moving forward. They've got a great opportunity to do so next week at Arizona State. That is not a rollover game just because that team cannot make a postseason berth. And just because that team has 59 new players on it, Kenny Dillingham is doing basically what Deion Sanders is doing here in Colorado, except just a few less brand new faces. Look, Kenny Dillingham was the offensive coordinator who came into this very building last year and embarrassed the Buffs as the OC for the Oregon Ducks. I watched that game against USC. To break the tape down for this one, they run every trick play in the book. Halfback pass, wide receiver pass. You're going to have to be ready and know your keys. Hopefully Shiloh can come back for that game next week as well. I think he's probably on track for that. Like I said, I don't know about Travis. Just going through other mental notes today. Pass rush, I thought they started to affect Caleb Williams in the second half. Part of that, I thought USC kind of took their foot off the gas, right, in the second half just a little bit. And then that interception Caleb Williams threw to Cameron Stillman-Craig that allowed the Buffs, to get within a score as this one finished out. I mean, he should have never thrown that football. I don't know what he was thinking, maybe just frustration. But for Caleb, as advertised, the guy will be the slam dunk #1 overall draft pick, and he's a generational talent. I don't know what else to say. Broncos fans, they ought to be hoping that the Broncos lose as many games as possible, because if you have an opportunity to go get that guy, that's why you tank for guys like that. You don't just tank for a Zach Wilson. You tank because Caleb Williams has the chance to come in and turn around your franchise. He's earned a lot more of my respect. I certainly had questions maybe about some of the things that he does, but man, if he gets enough time in the pocket, and that's the key. And that's another point I want to bring up here before we wrap up. If he gets enough time in the pocket, he can make a sandwich back there. He's got so much talent on the outside, and Zachariah Branch didn't even play today. Had Zachariah Branch played today, you might be looking at a much different ball game. They could have terrorized Colorado in that first half, even more so than they did. Taj Washington, Dorian Singer, both of them individually had very nice games. Brendan Rice with a touchdown as well. That was a great corner blitz that Charles Kelly called with Omarion Cooper, right? And then he called it again, short side of the field. He called it for Cormani, and Caleb just did a great job recognizing, hey, you're vacating, I'm occupying, right? They go down and score. Overall, I think this is the approach that the Buffs need to take, right? Whatever it takes. Shedeur running, getting the ground game going, committing to it. You're not just going to be able to win every game against top 25, top 10 teams going out throwing it 50 times a game. And part of the reason that Colorado was, in fact, able to claw back into it is in the second half, they did stick with running the ball. A little bit too much, I thought, down the stretch there with 6 minutes to go, eating up a ton of clock, but they did stick with running the ball. I'd like to see that continue against Arizona State. Other notes from today, look, this defensive line, not great, but I felt like they held up a little bit better, just a little bit better. USC didn't really try and run the ball that much. It's the Caleb Williams show for all intents and purposes. Marshawn Lloyd did have himself a very nice game. Offensive line, like I said, they had a better scheme. They ran the ball effectively. Those things are going to help Shedeur stay upright. And today, Bear Alexander and Solomon Byrd come in as two of the best, defensive pass rushers in the Pac-12, and I'm not sure either one of them. I think they may have had one sack combined, which I think you'd sign up for that all day, every day, considering Shedeur is the most sacked quarterback in major college football throughout the first month of the season. So moving forward against Arizona State, I think this is a great week to regroup here and recommit to running the ball. We saw a little bit of Alton McCaskill. I know Coach Prime's waiting for him. When he's ready, let him go. Like, you can see even in the few touches that he got here today, man, this dude has something that you just don't have on the field with anybody else. And when I look at McCaskill, there's something there that he can provide another dimension, and I can't wait to see more and more of him. And that's nothing against Hankerson and Wilkerson. I think I've been clamoring for Hankerson to get more first and second down touches. He did today, and it opened things up because, like I said to start this video, you're taking yourself off of the high dive in 3rd and long and putting yourself in 3rd and manageable, which Colorado did a much better job at the second half, and they converted a lot of them as a result. Now, defensively, I'm not exactly sure how you make adjustments, right? The level of competition is going to come down just a little bit, certainly, from Oregon and USC. But make no mistake, you have some really talented teams on your schedule, and there's a ton of football left to play. 3-2. I think if you would have asked Buff fans before the year if they would have signed up for 3-2, 5 games in, they would have emphatically said, hell yes, right? They got Colorado State, they got Nebraska. I said many times before the year, you get CSU and Nebraska here, everything else is gravy for me. And look, I thought today, the one thing you couldn't do with all the most popular entertainment and sports stars in the world were at Folsom Field today. The one thing that you could not do was go out and get embarrassed, and Colorado was not embarrassed today. I cannot wait to see what the final viewing numbers are. I'm guessing over 15 million. I am, especially because that game was big noon kickoff and it was really close late. Will Colorado be on this big of a stage the rest of the year? I'm not exactly sure. The interest will be there, but I'm not exactly sure that networks are going to commit to come broadcast a game like this with a team that probably doesn't have a chance at a national championship, let alone, their conference title at this point. Colorado, they can't worry about that. I actually think this is a really good time to sink back into a little bit more anonymity, right? It's been big stage, bright lights, and it certainly will be the rest of the prime era, but they get Pac-12 networks next week, and I think it's a 4:30 local kickoff at ASU. That's not a bad thing for this team. Develop some more things, limit the noise, and there's going to be, I think, a lot less maybe attention just as far as numbers go from national media this week. I think that's a good thing too. Get back to center, continue developing that identity, be multidimensional offensively. That is the only thing I'm a little nervous about, is that, well, we had to run the ball to compete with USC, but it's Arizona State. We're just going to go back to doing what we did. You've got too much tape out there to just go back. You've got to stay committed to this new approach where you're multidimensional and you're honoring the running game just the same as you are the passing game, because they do have a very talented backfield. And Shedeur, look, I heard someone say, what did they say this week? He's not an athletic quarterback, but he's a quarterback that can be athletic. Bogus. He's an athletic quarterback. He just has to take those opportunities when those opportunities, take advantage of those opportunities, I should say, when they present themselves. He did a better job of that today. Colorado loses 48-41. Coach Prime and Shedeur both said that they don't believe in moral victories, and I don't think there are moral victories, but at the end of the day, as I'll say what Coach Prime said, right? If you don't think that Colorado football is headed in the right direction, you got to get your head checked, because the Buffs, they've got some momentum here as a program and as a university, and it's been a lot of fun to cover these first 5 weeks. They're 3-2, but like I said, we just signed up for that very much so for the year. We'll see you guys down in Tempe.